Oh, and we are live. And there you are. We are live. And here we are again. And you say, "Tick, what? Come on, come
Tick.
on."
There's no ticks. Isn't that spraying? Isn't that? I think your camera is like it's got dirt on it or something.
No,
It's
the
got
camera
crazy
has
glare.
no.
It's got a crazy glare.
No, that's
It's not as bright as what?
that is true. Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a glare. Is this on? Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
on. We're
All
good.
right. Okay.
Hey, welcome. Welcome to those who are all watching on Facebook Land and YouTube Subculture.
Yes.
So awesome to be here tonight. In fact, I'm just thinking, Jose, I was thinking um, tomorrow's Valentine's Day.
I know.
And
I'm in trouble. Hey,
no, you're not in
while we're
trouble.
doing this, I need some of you to send down a note recommending what he's gonna
Inspiration.
do to you know
Encapsulate
to
the
show how much I love my wife.
the heart.
I
Can you
mean,
do that?
yes, I need help with that. But right now we have something important at hand here. We have chapter 45 of the book of Genesis. We're getting to the end, John.
We are.
Yes,
And in
yes.
fact, I was mentioning it was Valentine's Day for a reason. I had a bit of an introduction thought.
Mhm.
Just happened to be, and maybe it's because when you turn on YouTube, they suggest different clips or whatever. And there was a clip from what's it called again? Notting Hill with Julia.
Oh,
What's her name?
yes, come on.
So
Yeah.
this
Julia
love story.
Roberts and this
Julia
other fellow,
Roberts,
what was his name?
Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
And there's, anyways, so I was watched a little clip of it at the end, kind of the happy moment. But it reminds me of you watch this last moment where they've kind of come together and they got to know each other and they start to love each other, and then they break up, and then there's this last moment they come together. And if that's all you watch of the movie, and I'm watching it, I didn't watch the movie. I watched it, I'm getting a little teary eyed, because they're. Um,
You actually got a TV.
I got a little teary.
Oh, man,
Maybe I was cutting onions, but
yeah,
I
probably
was
were.
moved by this moment of love, even though I'd not seen the whole story. And that's kind of like the way Genesis 45 starts out. If this is the first time you're coming into this story,
Yeah.
you are coming in the emotional
Yeah, yeah.
culmination of the story.
This is like a bang. This is
Yeah.
like the the, the convergence of all truth here.
Yeah.
And
You need to share us on your
oh
Facebook
yeah,
page
I
here.
forgot. Oh Lord. Oh,
I
guys,
don't know how
give
to
me a
do that.
minute here. I need to do this. John just
Yeah.
reminded me.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Uh,
if there's your favorite love story, what's a good movie to watch? Maybe you can inspire the rest of us after watching this, which is all about love. Yeah, maybe for Friday night,
is
some
that
kind of
it?
love story.
What God can do with that? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
that's
one.
it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
That's it. How did you find that?
I have no
Okay.
idea, man, but it's
All right.
here.
So it's TikTok. It is past 7 o'clock. It is time to rock.
I got you.
You
I know
better
you.
sign up and come here because
I
we are
know
going to
you
talk
will
about
not
the
stop
love of
doing
God.
it, man. Definitely.
Oh
But
man,
again, it's an awesome night,
it is.
especially because tomorrow is the day of friendship and love. It's just some working thing, but it's fun. And especially fun because tomorrow, and I have to say it out loud, is the greatest anniversary of all. It's the anniversary of my union with my sweet, loving wife. And I tell you, I'm making it public because I want everybody to know that's the day. The most amazing thing is that this is the greatest day of my life. I tell you that
Wow.
there's nothing better that ever happened
Wow. That's
to
love.
me except when I had this great encounter with Jesus and He
Yes.
rescued me from darkness.
And he gives you the love for that
And
other
of
love.
course, when I had my two kids, I mean, William and Maya, and I mean, I have three other kids that are adults now.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. I mean, Joanne
Rudy Saldemar,
and
thanks for
Alan
watching.
and Andrew, and I hope that I'm watching, and I want to say hello and God bless you all. And keep praying for all of you, and continue to believe God for your great encounter. Um, and that's about it. let's get into this.
All right. So yeah, we're going to kind of backtrack a couple verses. But for those who haven't been here, I mean, you've got
This is new. It's new.
It's new, but it's
Yeah.
but the patriarchs, the sort of salvation story starts in Genesis 12 after the fall of creation.
Yeah.
And then you got Abraham, you got Isaac, and they got Jacob. And he has these sons, and they don't get along because they love Joseph more than the others. They sell
There's
Joseph.
envy and strife.
Joseph gets sold into slavery,
Mhm.
and then God raises him up,
Mhm.
and he's kind of hiding himself. 20 years later, now he's one of the main leaders of Egypt.
No,
His
no, he's
brothers
the
come.
boss.
He's
Look what
the
he
boss.
said here. I
Yeah, he
am,
is the king.
I am. There's a passage here that I can't remember. It says,
I think it comes in the verse. It says in verse 8,
yes, it says
made
something.
me a ruler.
I am ruler.
A shall.
I am.
Verse 8. Genesis 45, verse 8.
We'll find it.
We'll find it. We'll
But
get into
anyways,
it.
what's important is that this is awesome.
This
And
is
I
the
need you to
encounter.
be ready, be alert, because we're going to start reading and we're going to have fun today.
Joseph should have 20 years of bitterness, and he's got all the power, and he has every chance he could just beat those brothers.
Yeah,
But what does he?
but no, instead, what he does, he embraces them.
Oh,
And
man.
this is too far ahead. Let's step
pinnacle.
back and see what happened. There was a famine you mentioned, right?
Famine was in the land.
Yes, and
Joseph had a
Jacob
dream.
had to send his sons to find food in it.
Mm.
You already heard how the stuff went with Joseph and the famine, etc., etc. And now they are in this situation in which Joseph is coming literally and telling them, listen to this. Verse 1. I'm going to read the first
Genesis
2 or 3 verses.
45.
What we read last week. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one
Hey,
with
Catherine.
Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. Hallelujah. This is awesome. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Should I continue?
No, I mean, to me, this is such a, like we said, the culmination of God bringing them together, and it's, we can see in Joseph's heart that he's forgiven them. He never says it, but here he's just so, I think, amazed in God's providence, this miraculous bringing together. He must have seen this as God bringing them together for good. But I love his emotion. He is he's cried a few different times when he didn't reveal himself yet, but he is sobbing so loud.
Yeah.
Like
That's
20 years of sorrow and hurt and forgiveness and reconciliation and joy, and it's like, and he's a dude, and he cries.
That's amazing. I mean, holding out for 20 years and then testing and his brothers once and again, and discovering how much they had changed, how much actually they had literally being redeemed, how they have literally been transformed. And it's amazing how the guilt they carry is showing in the way they behave with their father and with their brother, and all of it is just extraordinary. And this is what moved Joseph to say, hey, it's enough. Let's just come and say.
And he says, Joseph said to his brothers, I'm Joseph. Oh! Is my father still well?
Yes.
But his brothers could not answer him. So dumbfounded were they on account of him.
That's a good one. Right here. They were frozen. You know, like when you were watching a scary movie and all of a sudden a scene comes up. That's what happened to them. They were frozen. They could not move. And here he says, they were terrified at his presence.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's we were talking earlier about, they were afraid enough because there's this whole backstory where Joseph puts the money back in the bag and then they come back. And then, there's this crazy situation that Joseph fabricated to see where they really were at. And you think they'd be afraid enough. They're in the palace of the top guy in Egypt. But now they find out the most powerful guy in Egypt is the guy that they hosed big time
Yeah,
20 years before, their
yeah.
own brother.
I mean, speaking of
They're
retribution,
really afraid.
now they're afraid. And, uh, and it comes next, this situation here. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." He had to, come on, wake up, get out of it. I mean, get over it. Let's go. Come on. And come close to me. When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." And I'm gonna stop there. I know you want to say something about that.
Yeah, well, you can maybe pick up the last part, but it kind of struck me. I mean, again, Scripture doesn't waste words. There's
Mhm.
reasons for everything, and so I mean, yeah, that drawing them closer. I mean, when they were eating, they had to be separate because the Egyptians officially despised the Hebrews or the shepherds, and but they're everything about them wants to recoil, but he's like, hey, come and just look at me closer, come closer. In some ways, it reminds me of, and because this is a resurrection moment, reminds me of
Yeah.
Jesus. Reminds me of Jesus in the upper room, where he suddenly appears, and that same reaction where something can be both so shockingly awesome,
Mhm.
because in the end
And
they were
scary.
and scary at the same time. And he's like, no, like, come closer. And to me, that's always the call of Jesus. The good news is that it's so, for those of us who are far from God, it's at the same time it can be scary,
Yeah.
but incredibly awesome at the same time. So I think he always kind of calls us closer to kind of check him out and just look for yourself and see that the
Yeah,
good
but
news is true.
there is something that we need to, because there is here we're talking about Jesus, and believe me, the revelation of Jesus is shocking and it's extraordinary, and it's certainly, especially when he comes in the cloud, it's going to be awesome, and it's going to be terrible for those that don't know him. But here we're talking about these guys counting themselves dead when he first
Yeah.
revealed himself.
Hey, Christine.
They probably were thinking we're toast, because I mean the first reaction is like they were afraid already, and now it turned out, like you said a minute ago, that the person, that the most powerful man in Egypt, uh, only Pharaoh was above him, and all of a sudden it's his brother, the one that they did all of these things to. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is Genesis 45, and so he kind of reveals the whole story. He says, I'm Joseph, and of course, remember Joseph, he's the one they sold into Egypt. This is Genesis chapter 45. But then he also says, I am Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Or am I?
yeah,
Yeah, he does say that. Yeah, in
he did, yeah,
verse 4.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so he's definitely saying, hey man, you guys, really messed me up here. But at the same time, he says, don't be distressed or reproach yourself. So he's aware of this kind of the
That they
internal
are
guilt,
freaking out, yeah.
their guilt and fear,
Mhm.
but also in the brothers, they also disagreed with each other over
Mhm.
whether he should have been sold in the first place. So it's a shared brokenness,
Mhm.
and I almost find it's just beyond understanding that he would just say, don't be so upset, because really it was God.
Mhm.
It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you,
That's
and
amazing.
that is so affirming. The sovereignty of God, the providence of God, and just as shocking as that is, he turned upside down. Later on he talks about it again a number of times, but even in this, he says, God sent me before you to preserve life. Now, of course, that could mean the life of his family, but even there's many other people who are benefiting by the fact that Joseph's in charge, is set food aside, and many other people, not just
That's
their
right.
family, would
That's right.
find life.
Yeah, pretty much the known world at the moment was being saved by this situation,
Yeah.
because only Egypt had food in the region, and everyone, every nation, every neighboring nation was coming to get food from them.
Yeah.
And so that's a reality it was pretty much to preserve the life of the known nations of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So Joseph keeps unpacking. Verse 6. It says, "For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and now we know it's 2 in the 7 years of famine, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting." Again, he says, "God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth and keep you alive by great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but
But
God.
God.
And he has made me a father of
Yes.
Pharaoh, a lord of all the household, and ruler of all the land of Egypt."
Yes.
So that's the kind of his message of good news. Hey, Debbie.
There
Awesome.
is such a contraposition here, and there is such a powerful message here because we're seeing here revealed the reality of the free will of man and the sovereign will of God. All of them, both of them, having a great encounter in there, where yes, you are responsible for everything you do, but God is sovereign and He always works everything you do according to His perfect and sovereign will. This is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard part of life.
This
If
is
you
pure
have
theology right there, bro.
yeah, well, it's a hard part of human life if you believe in God, and certainly the God in the Bible that reveals Himself as both powerful and good.
Mhm.
Is we find ourselves in a world where messed up stuff happens.
Yes.
Like, right? I mean, you think of in our modern history, you think of the Holocaust, we think of just horrible things that happen in the world, and we struggle a little bit. How can God be good? And yet these things happen. And sometimes people will change. Well, God's not really in charge of that, right? So it's like God kind of looked away, or however people describe it. But I would say the biblical picture is as you described it, is that God is always sovereign. He is always over all things. And I know when bad things happen in our life, we don't make God the author of the evil,
That's
but
right.
we also still affirm. I remember, now I'm trying to think of what the situation was. It was just a tragedy that happened in our life, and my uncle called my dad and said, God is still on His throne.
He's in control.
And
It's as simple as it gets.
yeah, so we, as much as we live in a broken world, which horrible things happen, absolutely, but it doesn't fall outside of the hands of God. We're always in the hands of God. And sometimes it's just a comforting God. And part of it, of course, the good news in Scripture is not that God is not only sovereign and that somehow He holds all things, but that God, through Jesus, entered our suffering.
Yes.
So it is the hardest question in theology in some ways, but Jesus comes and enters our weakness and takes upon Himself our suffering.
That's right.
And that's, to me, the only way you can have the idea of God who's in charge of all things. Bad things happen, is that Jesus is in some ways, it's a mystery still, but He still comes in.
Look at how this convergence of circumstances here leads us all to come to the Lord Jesus Christ, to the reality of our great salvation. This had to take place for Jesus to reach the cross.
Yeah.
And that's so powerful. And this is because the perfect plan of God was not something that happened by accident or that there were circumstances and situations. This is a perfect plan that was designed before the creation of the world. And this is as simple as it gets.
Well, and Joseph sees it. Like he's kind of, and Joseph definitely comes across as a pretty righteous character all the way through.
Yes.
Right. And so God seems to have given him that grace to both forgive, but to see that what his brothers did to be jerks, God used for good.
Yeah.
And that's
God had
pretty amazing.
Sketched out to bring them up into a circumstance that will save the nation of Israel. Literally, the creation of the nation of Israel came out of this situation.
Well, and so much unfolds. I mean, that's what's different about the Bible compared to maybe other religious texts. Is it's not really a collection of laws. It has a framework to how to live, but it's this unfolding drama of God being desire to be present and to save His people. And this is foreshadowing, of course, great salvation.
You're talking about Notting Hill. I mean, this is real drama.
Because we live dramatic lives too. We know it. We know what this is like. People hosing us and family that is broken. I mean, this is not like
the same brokenness that we know that our family live day by day, and certainly we are not strange to these circumstances.
Absolutely. So Joseph, he must have been putting together the speech for a while. And he's like, "Hey, what's going
I
on,
think
Dad?"
it was improvised. Really. I think he just came, he pulled it out of the sleeves. Yeah.
His lead. Yeah. Anyway, so he reveals himself and he says, "Hey, God, this is God's plan." And then it goes on in verse 9, and he's really concerned. Remember, last week we talked about it. It's the love of his father that kind of breaks his heart, because he starts out verse 3 and says, "I'm Joseph as my father." Anyway, so back to his father to verse 9. "Hurry and go up to my father Jacob and say to him," because he's still back in Israel, "Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will also provide for you, for there is still 5 years of famine to come, and you and your household and all that you have would be impoverished. Behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth that is speaking to you. Now you must tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt, and all that you have seen. And you must hurry and bring my father down here."
That's
So
amazing.
he wants to be
That's
the next.
amazing, and it's important that we see this carefully because Joseph is giving them a specific message. I mean, you understand. We'll see it later how Jacob is like, "What? What are you talking about?"
Mhm.
But here, Joseph is speaking of a knowledge that they do not expect to hear. I mean, he knows that there are 5 more years of famine, and he's telling them the only way that you're going to survive, that is going to be a family of Israel, is if you come to Egypt, because the famine is going to continue and you will all perish if you don't come. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and even though it's archaeologists have a and historians have a tough time trying to figure out where Goshen is, because this becomes the place where they really thrive. Um, but it was a place that was very fertile. I think Goshen means muck or clod.
Yeah.
But God's, we're going to bring him into this place. This will be a part of the story going ahead. Depends, I guess, if we get into Exodus, how much we get into it. But
Oh, we will get there.
I do
Yes.
find it interesting that the message, it almost feels like he's testing Jacob here, because Jacob, he's speaking to Jacob, and he talks about his power. He's Lord of all Egypt. Tell my dad I'm the dude in charge. And then he says at the end in verse 13, "Now tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt and all that you have seen. You must hurry and bring my father down here." Um, and of course, later on, they bring that message to Jacob, but it almost feels like a bit of a test of what will impress or draw Jacob.
Well, we have
Seems
to
like a distinct
understand
message.
Jacob, it's still chickening out. Jacob is still acting like Jacob, not like Israel. And this is what brought out this situation. He refused to send his son Benjamin, etc., etc. Um, and you mentioned the other day, why didn't he just go to Israel? Precisely because he was Jacob.
Yeah.
If he had been the Israel of God, he would have just mounted into a camel or whatever and just go.
Yeah.
But that was not the case. And Joseph seemed to understand that he needs to send a strong message so that Jacob understands that he needs to get out of it and come over.
Yeah. Well, we'll see when the report comes, because the brothers do actually describe his position and his power. It is interesting. Just it's more of a detail in verse 12. It says, "As your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see." So you witness me, my brother, my closer brother.
Notice that he only mentioned Benjamin there.
Yeah, that's right. And then he says that it is my mouth which is speaking to you. This is actually a dramatic shift, because earlier in the story he doesn't speak. He speaks his Egyptian language, and through a translator. Everything that he says to his brothers goes through a translator. But now he's speaking in Hebrew or Aramaic or whatever the described language.
Wasn't around just yet.
Some version of their mother tongue. So he's speaking their language directly to them. So there's a boom. He's weeping. He's like, "I'm Joseph." It's just so amazing.
I mean, it's a dramatic moment, no doubt.
Right.
But the emphasis that he's making here and the fact that Benjamin is seeing is a message to his father as well. That he's saying, I mean, it's not
This
only
is real.
me, but my brother knows me, and this is why it's important that you send the message that he needs to know that I'm alive, that I'm here, that I'm powerful, that I will welcome him here, and uh, that and with a kinder ransom, literally. All right.
Jay. Yeah. So then he finishes his speech. He reveals himself, and he gives this message: "Bring my brother back." And his message is over. And then verse 14. Did you want me to read, or you want?
No, no. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So then, weepy-eyed Joseph continues on. It says, "Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck, and wept. And Benjamin wept on his neck." They're just so embracing each other.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then he kissed all his brothers. You can just see them. Like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
10 of them, and he goes
It
one
was a
by one,
moment that
gives them
was
a kiss on the cheek or whatever,
yeah,
a full embrace, and wept on them. Every single brother, he was this reconciliation, this forgiveness, the grace of God. He just couldn't stop
yeah.
weeping.
I mean,
You
it's
know,
like you have to imagine the emotion that was
oh
in
yeah,
this moment. I mean, he had been enslaved for 13 years, and then he had to go through this process in jail, and finally, God had raised him up to a
yeah,
status of
Teresa.
power, and to him was a surprise. He was not expecting to see his
Wow.
brothers in there, and when he saw him, he realized God is at work in here,
Yeah.
and so he used the opportunity.
Yeah, and so it's almost he's just baptizing them with his tears.
Yes,
He
yes.
weeps on Benjamin. He weeps on every single 10 different brothers,
Mhm.
and then it says, and afterwards his brothers talking. Like to
Hallelujah.
me, that is the almost the sweetest moment. Like all the intensity, like one you thought was dead is alive, and then they're just hanging out.
You know the cool
They're
thing.
just hanging
You
out
know the
talking.
picture I see.
Yeah.
Typically, when one of the family, a person
We're in
or,
Genesis
or a
45, by
family
the way.
or a family that's been long time, a family that have immigrated, let's say to the
Mhm.
United States or Canada or
Yeah.
whatever, and they spend 5, 10, 15 years that they don't come, and then one day they show up into the family, and everybody's at the airport, and you see that video come
Oh
very
yeah.
often.
Oh yeah.
Everybody's at the airport, and when they see this person, everybody jumping and everybody's hugging and kissing and crying and emotional, and everybody touching at the same time. It's a great emotion. It's an emotional moment, and this is what's happening here. I mean, he had immigrated by force to Egypt,
Yeah.
and now he's like, whoa, all right.
It's just such
Mm,
beautiful moment of
yes,
reconciliation.
yes, yes.
So verse 16. Now when the news was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, it pleased Pharaoh and his servants. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this: load your beasts and go to the land of Canaan, and pick your father and your households, and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt. You will eat the fat of the land. Now you are ordered." So Pharaoh's still in charge. Do this: take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives, and bring your father and come. Do not concern yourself with your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours.
I mean,
Let's see
this
that.
is extraordinary.
Kobe!
Think about this for a moment, John.
Kobe, we're in Genesis 45.
Think about it for a moment. I mean, you do think about this for a moment. These guys, all are broken up, falling apart, looking for a bit of food to sustain them, to try to go through the famine. And then, after all this drama, all of a sudden they return to their land with a huge caravan of donkeys, of the precious things, food and carts and all. You can imagine that when this was marching through the land and reaching to Jacob, he must have seen this from afar and thought that it was some great king that was coming. coming by. He could not have imagined that there were his sons coming because the great procession of riches that was coming must have been overwhelming. And that alone to have impacted Jacob enough.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, and the only comment I would say in verse 20 of Genesis 45, it says, "Do not concern yourself with your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is
Yeah.
yours." And,
Yeah.
and it's a wonderful blessing. And maybe I read a little too much into it, but I think of how they later on will leave Egypt
Mhm.
in Exodus.
Riches too.
In riches, yeah, in riches from the land, absolutely. All right, verse 21. I don't know if you want to read that.
Yeah, I'll read this piece here. So the sons of Israel did this. Joseph gave them cars as Pharaoh had commanded, and he also gave them provision for the journey. To each of them he gave new clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And this is what he sent to his father: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and with bread, and other provisions for his journey. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they were leaving, he said to them, "Do not quarrel on the way." We just stop here for a second.
Mm.
Yeah, this is important because why did he say that? Do not quarrel on the way. He kind of knew.
Oh yeah, he knew, and there was the unspoken, and this is what families are like. Right? I mean, it was who was the brother? Was it Simeon who said, "Don't sell Joseph"?
And no, was Reuben.
Reuben. Yeah. So even within their own family, there's this. You know, they had done this horrible thing to sell their brother. They faked that he was killed to their own father, and they all had different feelings about it. Who was the one who drove this? In fact, it was Judah, the one who actually sort of led the way to
Sell them.
sell them.
When we
Simeon said we shouldn't have done this. So there's lots of that's the thing of family, brokenness kind of lands in funny places, so it's almost like Joseph is saying the way God's grace works is that you don't, you've been forgiven by God and me. Let that flow into your relationships. You let that reconciliation
Yeah,
filter
yeah.
between
I mean,
you.
soak in what just happened
Yeah.
and throw away all of that past. Yeah.
Well, Jesus talked about that too. You remember the guy that owed the king so much money. It was like a lifetime. He couldn't pay it back. The king forgives him, but then that guy that gets forgiven, he throws in jail someone that only owed him a few dollars. Is just a model of how God's forgiveness and grace is supposed to flow, and how sometimes, we like to get the grace from God, but we want to pass it on.
We cannot forget that. This is great show of love and forgiveness here. How Joseph behaved with his brothers. And with the power he had, he could have just, throw them in jail or just kill them and nothing would have happened.
Yeah.
But again, he turned around and just gave him love, gave him compassion, gave him mercy, gave him forgiveness. What Jesus did with us. I mean, that's exactly what Jesus done, man, with God. Had so much love for us that he just literally put his son in the line, in the gap, so that we did not have to pay the price, the guilt that we carry, the sinful nature that we have, the price that can only be paid with blood. I mean, this is why we still have to die because of the sin that we live with, and yet Jesus redeemed us from that, so that now we can live life eternal in Him, and that's amazing. That is amazing.
All right. Well, let's go on to the brothers heading back with the message, being told not to argue with each other. So when you're back in the minivan, where are you with each other? So then they went up to verse 25, and they went up from Egypt. Always go to Israel, to Jerusalem, you're always going up.
Mm-hmm.
They went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan, their father Jacob. Hey, Shirley, we're in Genesis 45, verse 26.
Yeah.
They told him, that's Jacob, saying, Joseph is still alive, and indeed he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. But he was stunned. He did not believe that, of course, because they had faked Joseph's death.
Yeah.
Verse 27, when they told him all the words of Joseph that he had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob was revived.
Hallelujah.
And Israel said, it is enough. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die.
But notice here, John, that is a beautiful. Notice here, we're talking about Jacob, and in the very last verse, Israel said,
Yeah, nice, eh? So it
it's like,
goes from
okay,
describing him as Jacob
yeah,
to
like I'm no longer the chicken, I'm no longer the chunky little guy that's afraid. No, no, now I am Israel. And I'm going to the land, and I'm going to see my son, and that's it. That's amazing.
yeah, but then interestingly enough, in the beginning of the next chapter, he's called Jacob again.
Again, yeah.
Yeah. So
We should continue anyway.
he's pumped. I mean, the only comment I was going to make, as I mentioned earlier, is that, and this is speculation, right? So I'm not saying this is sure truth, but when Joseph communicates to his father, he gets them to say that I'm in power and I have splendor. And then when they tell him that he's ruler, and they see kind of the splendor of Egypt and the wagons that Joseph had sent, what Israel says is, "It is enough. My son is still alive." So I think he kind of, it's not like, "Oh, awesome, we get to be in charge and have all the power and all the money." He's excited just for the truth
Just
that
it's
he's
just
alive.
enough that he's alive. The
That's
rest
all
it
that
doesn't
matters.
really matter. I mean, riches and glory and fame, all of that is garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, what Jesus gives us is so much more valuable than that, and that's that.
Yeah, that is that. So,
Yes.
all right. So now we're going to continue on into Genesis 46, and we're going to
46.
be
Trying to catch up on
trying to
things.
catch up. We're gonna. There's a lot of names in there, and there's, it's still
We're gonna
God's
jump
word,
on most of those names.
but let's go into the next scene. So then Israel said, "It is enough, my son is still alive. I will go see him before I die." So Israel set out with all that he had, and he came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob," and he said, "Here I am." And he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will close your eyes."
I wanna
So,
I wanted to say something quickly here. I was just reading a few minutes ago on Persiba, and I'm sure that that you have something to say about that as well. I mean, this is an important point. You mentioned the other day that was in the border of Israel heading to Egypt, right?
Beersheba,
Yeah,
I was going to look where it is located, but he was probably in Hebron, which is, about, I don't know how many kilometers south of Jerusalem,
that's right.
more in the sort of the desert area. But
Yeah,
Beersheba, I'm not 100% sure. It's on the north and south road, but I thought it was actually closer to Jerusalem, but I could be wrong.
yeah. But
All
either
right,
way,
quickly look at, you can Google it. Put it out there, Google it.
yeah, Google of course. Let us know exactly the location of Beersheba. But the important thing about this is that Beersheba is a place that was named by Abraham when he made a pact with Abimelech with regard to some wells that he had dug, and the people of Abimelech were pretty much pushing them away, etc. And they reached a pact in this place. And then Abraham prayed to God there, and he called the name Beersheba. And then later we see that happened on Genesis 21 and 22. And then we see on Genesis 26 how Jacob as well uh, stopped at Beersheba there, and there he prayed to God and raised an altar to God, and again God spoke to him in there. Isaac,
Yeah.
pardon me. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so Beersheba is south of
There you go.
There's
Hmm.
Hebron. It's Jerusalem, Hebron, Beersheba, going
Hmm.
southwest on the
That's
way
right.
to Egypt.
On the way to
Yeah,
Egypt. Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's not far. But yeah, so he is. Um, yeah, what I find interesting, well, there's a bunch of things I find interesting. So it says in verse 2, God spoke to Israel in visions, and there's actually a plural in the Hebrew. There's not just a vision, but vision. So there's a sense of there's an intense encounter, maybe
Mhm.
multiple visions that Israel or Jacob had there. And it's often the case, God calls, and like with Samuel in 1 Samuel 2, he
Mhm.
says, Here I am. But what I find interesting is kind of what you said earlier is that this was the same place that Isaac had done a sacrifice, made the altar. So it could have been that he was sacrificing at the same altar.
Mhm.
But what's this is a big moment
Mhm.
because up to this point in the salvation story, as we talked about a number of times, Genesis 12, the call of Abraham, who was supposed to follow God's leading to the promised land. He leaves and goes to Egypt. In fact, God instructs him not to go back to Egypt. And Isaac is actually never leaves Canaan. He
That's
never
right.
leaves Israel. And so now Jacob is being faced by this call to actually
To leave.
to leave the promised land. And is this okay to do? And so he consults God. And
Yeah, and what's important is that Jacob knew the story. He knew the instructions, and he knew what happened with Abraham going to Egypt and how he ended up on the backslash and the problem he had with his wife Sarah, etc. So all of these he was aware of because they tend to pass the story from one generation to another. So consulting with God here was not a strange thing to do.
no, it was the right thing to do, in
Exactly.
fact, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, that in later important leaders like David, who, sometimes when we're, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, we can consult him and ask him, what should I do? And he can give us maybe direction, and we go that way. And then sometimes we can assume that, well, that worked last time. I won't consult him
It
again.
doesn't work like that.
So, and David was a man after God's own heart. And even though he had victory doing a certain thing once, he keep coming back to God. So God, what do you want me to do?
Yes.
So this is definitely an important moment because this is the end of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In the future, they will be called nation
The
of
nation
Israel.
of Israel. Quickly, one quick comment here is with regard to what you just said. We, as children of God, and this I call it on to everyone who's listening, whether you are uh, known as Christian or not, consulting with God is a thing that we must do. And believe me, if you call upon God with your heart, He is going to respond. It's not something that I'm imagining or that I might be dreaming or anything like that. You don't have to believe me, you just have to try it and see what happens. Now, if you just want to say, let me just fool this guy, I'm going to say, God, whatever. And it doesn't work like that. You have to really have a great conviction in your heart and a true, deep, deep conviction that God is going to respond when you call Him and actually be willing to obey His commands when you listen. Because this is the thing God knows your heart and He understands what you're thinking a year ago before you thought that you were going to think it. So you cannot fool God. But if you do call him from your heart, he is going to respond. Just try it.
Yeah, and it's sometimes as a Christian we can think, well, God was back then. He did cool stuff with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and Jesus was great to be around. But God, he's not really active today. People can think that, but there's many ways that we can hear the heart of God.
Yes.
So it could be, we're praying about something, and we say, God, should I do, X? And then God might raise a word from Scripture that pops in your mind that could be part of His direction, but it could be that that He's telling you that what you're doing is not right. Like it could be something that's convicting. It could be some sort of something that happens within our own heart, a sense of peace about a decision or an option. And it could be consulting the communion of saints,
Yes,
right? Other
yes,
Christians to say,
absolutely.
and them to pray with you.
Mhm.
There's a number of ways that God
Speaks,
speaks,
yeah.
not necessarily audibly or in a
Oh
vision
yeah,
like
oh yeah. I
Jacob.
mean, the most common is not that he's gonna go and tell you or whisper in your ear or anything like that, but he's definitely gonna give you evidence, clear evidence that is coming from him. Whichever way he opt to speak to you, he might, and it has happened that he might decide that in your case he's gonna speak to you audibly, or he may speak to you in a vision or in a dream, or it could be through scripture or through the voice of a friend, or even sometimes just driving around, you see a big message on the street, and all of a sudden the message just hits you in the heart, and you realize this is coming from God because He will make sure that you understand that it's from Him. That's for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be in, kind of looking back, um, for I went to university for engineering, and
Mhm.
I loved doing that. I loved designing things. I loved things that were tangible. The ministry, like being a pastor now, is this very different kind of life.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was challenged by a fellow saint, about considering ministry. Never thought of it a million years, but it hit me in the heart. I was actually so angry at him. I'm like, why did you mess up my life with this word from God? But he felt convicted, and he challenged me in a gracious way. He didn't say this is what you're supposed to do, but he said what he felt God wanted me to hear. I couldn't shake it. So that was evidence that maybe this is important. It
Yeah.
didn't go away. In fact, um, I went. It did eventually kind of surrender that and went to seminary, and then I got a call to be a pastor in a church in Ancaster, Ontario. And it was only years later I remembered that while I was in engineering, even while I was doing my graduate work and working at another job, I used to drive right past Ancaster on the way home from the university. And every time I was driving past there, I would remember I was always thinking about this call. Should I be going into ministry? But it was only years later when I was actually a minister right near that intersection where I kept thinking about it. I always remember it. At that stoplight, I would end up thinking about the call to ministry.
So you tell me that you were running from me.
Oh, I was like, good thing that whale didn't swallow
So
me. Like,
they had to actually put a leash on you and pull you in,
yeah.
like
So
he does with the disobedience. That's good to know. Now I have something.
something over me.
Now I have
Okay.
something on you.
Okay.
All right.
Where are
Then,
we? So he gets this vision.
mhm.
God says, I'm going to build a great nation. He ends up. What's amazing is he says, God, of course, it's a promise to Abraham. God says, I'm going to make you a great nation.
That's right.
And even though he didn't have any kids,
Mhm.
Abraham believed in Genesis 12. And here's this, again, this promise kind of bubbling up. I'll make a great nation now.
Mhm.
Later on in the story, we don't want to give too much away, but they end up, starting with the book of Exodus, they move from being residents who are welcome to slaves.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and so Joseph,
Actually, there was a
Jo-
prophecy to God, to Abraham.
to Abraham as well, that he would spend all these years in a foreign land. And of course, they would know that story too. But anyways, Joseph gets sold as a slave, and he rises up. But now this whole group comes to Egypt, become slaves, and also become a nation. So Joseph's story becomes a foreshadowing of what is promised here to Jacob.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah. So we are on verse 1.
I think we've gone through the words of God,
Yeah.
and then we go to verse 5.
So verse 5. Then Jacob left Beersheba, and Israel's son took their father Jacob and their children and their wives and their carts that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. They also took with them the livestock and possession they had acquired in Canaan, and Jacob and all his offspring went to Egypt, and took with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons and his daughters and granddaughters and all his offspring. There, and then it gives us a huge list of everyone that came more or less uh, to Egypt with them. We're not going to go through that list. Uh, I recommend that if you want to know the names of each one of them, verse 8 to verse literally 26 speaks of that. And we encourage you to read it, even though some of those names we'll never hear again. But then here, We have on verse the sons of Judah. It's important that we count. Which one was it? The verse.
Are you talking about all the names of the
That's
descendants?
right.
So yeah, so verse 8 talks about the descendants, then it mentions Reuben,
Hmm.
and then Gad, sons of Rachel, Dan, sons of verse 8. Oh, verse 12. Judah's sons.
That's right. Yes, yes, yes.
Judah's sons Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan had died in the land of Canaan, and Perez's sons were Hezron and Hamul.
And this is important, precisely, John, because and Onan were the two children that were unfaithful to God. Remember the story eh, with Tamar and how Judah ended up sleeping with her, thinking she was a prostitute, and she had twins, which were Perez and Sarah. And now Perez here had a son that's called Esrom, and Esrom is the direct, what do you call it, ancestor of Jesus.
Yeah. So yeah, throughout this story, the Joseph narrative, Judah goes from kind of the conspiring one who sends him to slavery. He is the most reconciled, and now he becomes the leader. And so in verse 28, it says, after they kind of have all the list of names and how many there were 70, it says verse 28, he had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph. So now Judah, the third or fourth born, he goes ahead, point the way before him to Goshen. So when they came to the region of Goshen, Joseph ordered his chariot and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. He presented himself to him, and embracing him around the neck, he wept on his neck a good while. Then Israel said to Joseph, "Now I can die, having seen for myself that you are alive."
I wanted to go back a little to verse 27. With the two sons who had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the members of Jacob's family, which went to Egypt, were 70 in all. I was just reading a few minutes ago because I remember in the book of Acts, chapter 7, we see a narrative there where Stephen was a follower of Jesus who was literally stoned to death in the presence of Saul, who later would become Paul. And there, when he was giving a speech to the Sanhedrin before he was done, he mentioned that they were 75, the ones that went from Egypt. Um, the reason for this, as I understand, is because the Septuagint, the version, the Greek version that that they would have learned then uh, show the 75 because it includes it includes the sons of Joseph, and I am not exactly sure which other children, but it's important to clarify that there's no discrepancy between those two uh, points in there. I needed to clear that.
Did you need to do that?
I needed to do that because definitely, if somebody go read on the book of Acts and see that it says 75 and here it says 70, they are going to raise questions.
Well, and there's also, I mean, within the list itself, according to, um, um, like this is a Jewish commentary that I use often. It says a total of 70 persons. Not clear how this number is obtained, but the aggregate of the summations given for the matriarch, each matriarch is 70. However, this computation does not include only those who came. Anyway, so there's a reason why it says 70. It's not always clear why that is, but certainly 70 is a number, like 7 is the number of fullness. Mm-hmm. So it is at least a symbolic.
It's possible that that's why they used it.
We don't know.
They use it, but when I saw this in the book of Acts, and it just struck me that.
Wow, you had a great memory. You would know the difference.
And I needed to bring it up just to make sure that you don't think that is some kind of weird thing going on. It's simply the way they counted the number. when one included a group that was not appearing in this group. All right, so there you go.
But for me, the most important part is that Joseph meets Jacob.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Yeah, this is
and when
essential
this
to
is the
understand.
encounter,
Yes,
you know, he says, "Now I can die. I'm seeing for myself."
yes.
So yeah, so they come to the land, and just just a wonderful moment of reunion and affirmation of God's amazing grace. So yeah, that's awesome.
Might as well read the last piece so that we can wrap it up. What do you think?
All right, so he weeps. He says, "I can." Israel says, "I can die." Verse 31. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me, and the men are and the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, 'What is your occupation?' you shall say, 'Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth until now, both we and our fathers, that we may live in the land of Goshen, where every shepherd is lonesome to the Egyptians."
So there was a method to his madness. Joseph was here making sure that the Israelites did not get too deep into mingling with the Egyptians. In other words, I am pretty sure that God had a lot to do with it. Let's keep them separate, that they don't get involved in the things and traditions of the Egyptians, and they create their own traditions and their own. They continue to be worshiping God and not as idols that the Egyptians were worshiping at the time. And this was very, very, very important. We're going to see it later in the book of Exodus. Why?
Yeah. Yes. 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 I mean, to me, in some ways, it almost reflected Jacob like move because he feels like he's kind of moving. He's kind of playing Pharaoh a little bit. Um, that he's saying when you ask what your occupation is, he says keeper of livestock rather than shepherds because shepherds are lonesome to the Egyptians. So it's like here's the line you got to use. So to me, it's kind of working the system. But regardless of what he's doing, there is to me a very much at the end of this chapter a note of foreboding.
Yes.
Right, that they are going to be they're going to be grit in the machine. They're going to become an annoyance at some point. And they're eventually there's going to be a conflict, and then something's going to have to
You know,
happen.
it's sad that it doesn't explain how they went. It does say briefly something. I know that historically there are some points raised that there was some kind of taken over of the traditional pharaoh was overtaken by other nation, and they ended up putting a pharaoh that was nothing to do with the traditional Egyptian pharaoh because Egypt was invaded, etc. I read that somewhere. I don't remember long.
Yeah, I think those are actually different stories. The Hyksos were a
That's
group of
right.
people
Yes, yes.
who were Asiatic people, so past Israel, maybe more up in the steppes. But there was a pharaoh. It was really a deconstruction pharaoh. I think Amenhotep. I could be
That's
totally
right.
wrong.
Yes, yes.
Totally wrong.
Well,
When
it was
you
Amenhotep. Yeah, I
yeah, I think
remember,
it was
yeah.
Amenhotep, and he totally changed the religious traditions and sort of brought back an old god again. I don't remember exactly the calf worshiping or something. But when you had your name, they would have what's called a cartouche, and it was an oval outline and had a series of symbols that would spell out your name. And his shrines, his memorials were defaced later on because they went reverted back to their traditions after this pharaoh. But so they kind of wiped away his cartouches and put other names in there. But yeah, I mean Egypt has, and when I was in Egypt about years ago now, one of the things we were continually impressed upon us was how much Egypt plays a role in who Israel would
That's
become
right.
and who they
Yes,
were.
yes. And in
And
fact, their formation had a lot of influence from Egypt.
yeah,
Definitely.
well, and their formation, their identity, and the life kind of rising up came through the cauldron of suffering, and then ultimately depend, like even though they're wealthy, ultimately dependence on God to set them free, right? To bring the reality of death before them, and God actually stood between. This is the book of Exodus. He stands between the death they deserve, all of them, including Israel and Egypt. And the angel of death sort of stood in the way, and through they were set free, and they end up sort of fleeing through the Red Sea. So all this, this is foreshadowing what this conflict here is foreshadowing what will happen, but ultimately foreshadowing the coming.
That's right.
That true redemption through life comes through the suffering, not of a whole people, but of the true Israel, who is Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And that's where we are.
Really amazing. Yes.
Boom.
Aren't you enjoying this? This is amazing. I mean, you have to come back on Thursday because we're going to continue the story and it's going to be like, wow, awesome. So we wait on you on Thursday again. Oh,
yeah, we're next week Thursday at 7 p.m. We're always here, the Lord willing. And every Sunday we're here in this space at 100 Nipissing Road. You're welcome to come for breakfast. We start about 9:30 or so. Our worship service starts about 10:15, and then maybe about 10:30. If you're watching on Facebook, we'll also again be Facebook Live for the message, which this Sunday, interestingly enough, though the Egyptians didn't like the shepherds, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. And that's what I'm going to be doing Sunday. So
yes.
Love to see you.
I am the good shepherd. Yeah, you should follow me. They know me. They know my name. And okay.
We're over time, so
yes.
Why don't I close in prayer? Lord Jesus, thank you for this scripture, Lord, and the way that it foreshadows the ultimate redemption of those who turn to you. Thank you that you, that you show us the way to life. In fact, you promised that you give us life and life to the full. So, Lord, we pray for those who are just considering you, Jesus, to do as Joseph said, called to draw closer to you, Jesus, to really examine the hope that comes from you, the forgiveness that comes from you, the fullness of life that comes from you, a life that not only affects our own very soul and our own eternity and assures it, but it begins to affect the people around us, our families, and the communities that we live in, Lord. So may your grace flow through each person who's listening to us today. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. God bless you. See you on Thursday, on Sunday rather. All right.